All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jessica Morrison, Realtor with Ferris Property Group. And tonight we have with us the famous Mike McKeever with State Farm. And we are going to talk about homeowners insurance and just all of the nuts and bolts that go with that. So, Mike, thank you so much for your time. Give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are and why you got into insurance with State Farm.
Sure. Well, as Jessica said, my name is Mike McKeever. I'm a local agency owner for State Farm. And, I think we are really passionate about building relationships in the community and making sure that everybody that we come in contact with is prepared and protected. And so we really love to serve and we really love to be involved in the community. And so I think it's been a great partnership in the Boone County area.
Awesome. Now, how long have you been in insurance or what caused you to make that your choice as a career?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's a great question. I took the biggest risk of my life on my 40th birthday. So I had a previous career in retail and thought long and hard about making a career change on a couple of different occasions, but ultimately decided that insurance was the path that we wanted to pursue. And I had looked at the insurance industry out of college, and wasn't much of a risk taker at that point in my life. And so I transitioned to what I knew and was able to be successful at. And I think that the longer that we were in the area and became more rooted and had kids in school, the more we valued the community. And my wife looked at me one day and said, I really don't want to move anymore. And so we decided to do something on our own and established our agency in 2014. We launched in 2015. And so we're about to wrap up our sixth year in business, which is kind of crazy to think about, but just have enjoyed every minute of being in the community.
Yeah, I love how much you guys are involved and you've really helped make Whitestown and specifically just be a great place. And it's always great to go to those different community events and see you guys participating. So thank you for that. I know that's a lot of hard work and dedication and lots of
Sure.
probably late nights involved with planning.
We love to do it, so it's great to see everybody out there. It's even more fun when you start to recognize folks that you know, and ends up being more of a social event than just manning a booth. So seeing all
Mhm.
your friends.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's jump in. So, the objective for today's webinar, for those not familiar, is we're talking about homeowners insurance. And I'd like to tailor the conversation at the beginning to really my first time home buyers or people who have never purchased a home or are in process. And, Mike, what is your expert opinion on things that a new client should be looking for when not only selecting a policy, but how do they evaluate companies and agents? And that's probably a loaded question, so feel free to break that down.
Oh, sure. I think it's a great question, and a lot of first-time home buyers are transitioning out of a rental environment, whether that's renting a home or being in an apartment. If somebody gets their first job and is coming out of school and buying a home. So I think the folks in those situations understand the kind of the personal property coverage piece of that. But when you're talking about a home, you're talking about a whole new Pandora's box of questions that you wouldn't even know to ask. So I think the very first step, and I would say this about the insurance agent, I would say this about the real estate agent, I would say this about the lender, is find somebody that you really connect with and can build a solid relationship of trust on, because that person is going to be your advocate. That person is going to educate you. That person is going to lead you through the process. And most importantly, most of all, they are going to ask the right questions of you to help you be successful, to set you up for success. So, in a world where we try to commoditize everything, you're talking about the biggest investment that you make in an asset. Um, and you really want to make sure that it is um, it is protected the right way. So I think regardless of which of the three, kind of the triangle of the home buying process, the lender, the real estate agent, and the insurance agent, we all have to work together. But the number one place to start is on that relationship side, and making sure that you feel good about the questions that are being asked of you, and that you're getting enough information to make an informed decision. But the relationship piece is critical.
Awesome. Okay. So let's say that a lot of times what tends to happen with clients is they don't know who to contact. And so they ask me as an industry partner who I would recommend or possibly refer them to. And I have a list of people and, just say, hey, feel free to call any of these people and see, what they think or what you think. Or sometimes if it's not me, they ask, it's a friend or family member. And I would say that the latter is more common. Um, but let's say that there's been an introduction made to you. What are the top questions that you think at a minimum people should be asking to evaluate not only the agent, but the company? Or what are questions that you wish more people asked when they're trying to do either their due diligence or selecting a policy that really makes sense for them?
Sure. Well, I think the first one is just to ask a little bit about the agent and the company that they represent, or companies that they represent. In addition to that, I think letting the insurance professional know that this is your first home and that you're new to the process. And I think it makes the whole conversation easier, based on the fact that we are queued up then to ask some different questions, to try to help facilitate that. Things that will connect dots for later, that make the whole process easier. Remember, it's our job to not only protect your largest single asset investment, but also we want to make sure that everybody closes on time. So we got to make sure that we've got all the connections made in advance. So I think one of the things that in terms of questions to ask is you really want to treat that like an interview. Make sure that you understand the office structure. Make sure you understand what the bias for action is and the sense of urgency for those folks to get things done for you. I think red flags from the beginning might be, do you hear back when you call and leave a message, when you send an email, when you send a text? Are you hearing back? Is someone getting back with you within a reasonable amount of time? So I think there are certainly situations where it's not every interaction isn't going to be the right fit. The first one might not fit, but I think building that foundation of trust and being open and transparent is probably the most important way to build that relationship. But if you don't know what questions to ask, that is completely okay. We are more than happy to take the time to invest and ask the questions that are important.
Yeah, I would say, if someone were to call in, and I think I've been guilty of this in the past, and it would come from a fear of being taken advantage of. And I think sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, but there can be a stigma where I call in and maybe someone's going to try and sell me a cheap policy or something that's going to, like, I know you, Mike, like, I wouldn't think that of you, but I think if I was new to that experience, that would be one of my number one concerns is this person just going to take my money, and is this going to actually be a good policy? And some of that, again, comes back on the client to do their due diligence. But I think my question or comment on that would be, do you tend to run into situations where if a client was more transparent with you, it would actually enable you to help them better, rather than maybe them concealing information out of fear of being taken advantage of? And I'm sorry if I'm not illustrating that very well.
No, that's okay. And I think there certainly are situations where if someone's not sure, they may be a little more reluctant to ask questions. And so what I can only speak for my agency, but I think it's absolutely critical that we teach the professionals in our offices. And so in my office in particular, every single person that works for us is fully licensed. And they are trained on a very specific process for home to ask a whole litany of questions. And I think, my let me kind of flip the question back and let you know that if you are not being asked a lot of questions about the home, if you are not being asked a lot of questions in general about yourself and how the process is moving along and the timeline for the process, um, and really digging into the detail, that's a red flag. So anybody can sit there and try to map real quickly a price per square foot and try to get somebody a price really quickly. If you're getting a quote before those questions have been asked, that's really concerning. And I think you'd probably find that more in a call center environment than a risk professional's office that you're seeking out or has been referred to you. Most of the time in our industry, you're gonna have the folks that are gonna take the time to really get to know you and specifically talk about the house. I think it's even more important, Jessica, for new construction.
Hmm.
So if there's not a baseline, if there's not a lot of information available to us on new construction, expect a lot more questions about those than something that's existing.
Okay. So that's an interesting question, or something that just popped in my mind was, do you see more policies get to be more expensive when the home is older versus newer, or um, like a roof that might need to be replaced soon? Like, just kind of give me some context into how you guys break down pricing out a policy.
Well, I think there's so many. We could be on here till the wee hours of the morning, but there's so many factors that get rated into those policies. What I will tell you is, in general, in the industry, you're actually going to get credits for things being brand new, especially utilities. That's going to help bring the cost of homeowners insurance down. So what we do see is new construction homes typically are less expensive, which is kind of counterintuitive. You would think that something brand new would be maybe more expensive, but because of those credits, now over time, those credits do erode a little bit. The pricing structure gets back to normal. But I think there are some things that are, if you think about just what can go wrong with the house and the things that are the most risky, those are the things that are going to kind of rate policies differently, right? If you live way in the middle of the country, and you don't have access to a fire department or fire hydrants or water year round, obviously those policies are going to be more expensive than somebody who is 15 feet from a fire hydrant. So it's one of the things that, where the home is located, what the risk characteristics of that area are, all of those things play a role.
Okay. So when you say risk, is that specific to elements and wear and tear, or can crime be a contributor? Like, does crime influence at all in a homeowner's insurance policy?
Well, I think overall, again, just in general, anything that you could consider a risk characteristic, I'm sure plays a major role in the um, how many claims they've paid in an area. For example, if you live in Oklahoma and are in Tornado Alley, that is obviously going to be something that the insurance companies are going to rate for. If you live on the coast, on the southeast, and you've been through all of these hurricanes, those are things that insurance companies are going to rate for. So in general, when it comes to risk, and when I use that word, that's kind of what I'm alluding to, just in terms of risks that an insurance company would have to pay money out of pocket to take care of. Those are going to be the things that are rated foremost.
That makes sense.
Sure.
So I'd like to be specific For the audience watching this, what would you say are the top 5 questions that they need to ask when interviewing an agent?
That's a great question. So, in terms of the top five, I would really interview two things first, and that would be, tell me about tell me about your agency, and then tell me about the product that we're discussing today. Okay, because um, there are homeowners policies in the state of Indiana are written on different what are called forms, and so those things can be as different as apples and watermelons. And so making sure you understand the intricacies of those policies is really important. What's available to you, options that you have, what things are need to be endorsed versus which are included in those policies. And so I think that would be a big one. So I would ask, number one, about the agent and that you're dealing with and the agency, get to know them a little bit. I think second, let's talk about the policy that we're discussing today. I think the third thing that I would really want to know about is what help me understand what is included in the numbers that I'm hearing. Okay, because typically in homeowners insurance, you're going to hear about the dwelling coverage, which is for the building. You're going to hear about personal property, which is for the stuff inside. You might hear something about dwelling extension, and there's all these terms that start to kind of overwhelm you. So I think that you really want to make sure that you understand what those numbers are and how they impact. You would want to ask about options that you have, because I think if you don't know what's available to you and your agent isn't maybe giving you a sense of where you have choices, that's a really important thing to know as well. How can you help either drive a better value for a policy for you, or maybe protect something that's really important to you that wasn't discussed? I think we're going to ask some questions to get to the bottom of that at my agency, I can tell you, and I'm sure at others as well. But for example, is there a limit on that policy for jewelry? Is there a limit for water backup? Is water backup included on my homeowner's policy? There's a million questions that you could potentially ask if you know which ones to kind of drill down into. But that information mostly flows from you asking about those numbers and what do they mean, and how, what options you have available to you. So agency, the product, what is available to you, what options do you have, would be the first questions that I think I would ask. I don't know that I can enumerate 5 for you.
That's okay. Oh, we got a little bit of feedback. That's all right. So I've heard it said that some people tend to be so focused on finding the cheapest policy. And when I've heard other insurance agents kind of break this down, correct me if I'm wrong, one thing to really look for or make sure is included is to understand if in the event of a fire, if your home were to burn down, do you have enough coverage to cover the cost to rebuild that home in today's standards, the coverage to pay not only your mortgage, but also your rent and any utility bills on both properties? Would you say that that's consistent, or is that something that's naturally included, or is that something that people should dig deeper when getting a general first policy?
Yeah, there's a whole lot to unpack there. So let me start in the beginning. So you talked about something extremely important, and I wanted to make sure we touch on it. And so you said something about the cheapest. Maybe let's just use the cheapest and the best. So understand that there is a difference between price and cost. So when you are buying the cheapest, you absolutely will be getting the cheapest. When you are looking for specific coverages, when you're looking for things to be maybe better covered, those things cost money. So there's an element of price versus cost. There's going to be situations where we're trying to get it as inexpensively as possible, which is understandable, and we want everybody to pay a fair price in the industry. But just understand, those are going to come with less features, and maybe loss settlement provisions may be a little bit different in terms of how claims are settled. So when you also asked about the second part of that, you got into kind of a fire situation. Is that right? The example?
Yes, that was what was shared with me.
So I think one of the things that you really want to make sure that you think through is we get into this discussion a lot in review meetings about how much coverage do you need, and how, gosh, that sounds like a lot of money. And I think the thing to remember, and this would go for folks who are buying the policy for the first time or folks who have an existing policy, who look at that personal property number and say, wow, that's a big number. But my stuff's not worth that much. And the thing to remember is, it's not what your stuff is worth, it's what it would cost to replace. Mm-hmm. So if I can impart a little bit of wisdom, I always recommend that you walk room to room with your phone and make videos by room very quickly, less than a minute, maybe 30 seconds long. Just scan the room and open doors and drawers. And so I think you're going to see for yourself that you can really document and spark your own memory on what you had and what was there. And then things of value, take still photographs, anything electronic, try to get the make, model, serial number, all that kind of stuff. But your insurance professional should be very willing to let you know what things you should be thinking through that maybe have a limit on a policy. So, for example, like jewelry is usually limited on a homeowner's policy. Beyond a certain amount or beyond a certain value, you'd have to talk further with your risk professional about that. But in general, think about what it would cost to buy new versions of what you own, and that kind of puts that number in perspective for you. So typically, that number is going to be based on a percentage of what the building coverage is. And the last thing you talked about is really important, and it's called loss of use. And so if you were to be displaced, those policies are going to have a provision. It's going to vary by policy and by carrier how generous that provision is, but how much money do you have in the event that you are displaced? And thinking about it in rational terms, if you know what you were just paying for rent and you're buying a homeowner's policy, divide the dollars that are enumerated for that loss of use by the number of months that you'd have to pay additional rent. That'll give you an idea of how long that money could possibly last. Now, in the beginning, obviously, of that loss, you might need a toothbrush and underwear and an outfit for tomorrow and some meals. But beyond that, you're really talking about additional living expenses. And think about how far that would get you in terms of time. And I think that's probably the most effective way to navigate it. But you gave me a whole bunch there. So does that all make sense?
Yeah, well, on this side, I don't know as much as you do, obviously, on the subject. So it seems like it's not that much. But I mean, having to break it down like you shared it certainly makes sense that it would be a complex question.
Sure.
So do you see that kind of slightly segueing, but I think it's still relevant to what we're talking about now? Do you see challenges when people look at bundling insurance, maybe like if they've got auto insurance through one company, I don't have cable anymore, but there are certain insurance companies who advertise incentives for someone to bundle insurance services with a provider that they already have established, whether it's a car or a boat, etc. Does it always serve the client's best interest to do that, or is bundling actually a good idea because of potential cost savings?
Yeah, I think in general, those commercials really are coming from a place of combining home and auto, and in most cases, interest of full disclosure, that is a good idea because of the discounts that are offered for having both. There are going to be one-off situations where an a la carte insurance purchase is going to be required, but those are kind of few and far between and very specific. And so I think when you're looking at insurance options, certainly I would recommend you shop based on home and auto together. And again, I think that there's a million companies out there all competing for the business. I think again, find a relationship. There's going to be carriers that come and go. There's going to be situations where everybody is going to raise a premium now and then, but ultimately I think the relationship and the trust that you build is going to be really important to making sure that your customized package suits your needs and protects what's most important to you.
Sure. So I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Sure.
Because I'd love to hear how you respond to this. So one of my number one like top things that I hear from people, especially from established homeowners, and they go to evaluate their policy and shop rates. And I know we've talked about cheapest isn't always best, but sometimes when they've been with a particular company for even 15 years and they look at another company and they're being quoted for something that's drastically different in price, it can create the feeling that they've been paying way too much. So what are your thoughts on premiums where, why is it that some people after so many years of loyalty to a particular company are paying more versus them when they switch? Like what would they be giving up in value, or is it possible that someone can be paying too much on a policy?
Well, I think that there's a couple competing philosophies there that we should probably discuss. I mean, I think I can't speak for the specific details of every company's policy, but I can tell you that in my world, there are things like longevity credits that are given to folks. The longer that you're with a company, your loyalty should be getting you a pretty good deal. I think where some of the disconnect comes from is that all homeowners policies have inflation protection built in. And that factor changes over time. And I think they try to do a pretty good job of keeping pace with inflation of the market. What that's designed to do is it's designed to keep you from never having too little insurance to replace your home through those years. But you want to work with an active office that is asking you every year or every other year to sit down and talk about life changes and things that are different for you, new purchases that you've made, improvements to the home, checking in on values in your neighborhood, what it would really cost, revisiting tools that we have to make sure that inflation protection hasn't pushed the amount of insurance that you have well beyond what it would cost to replace your home. And in those situations where someone is asking questions about that, it often comes back to it's been 10 years since they've talked to their agent. Their house has just renewed 10 times and it hasn't been refreshed. So I would encourage anybody that's in that situation, whether you call me or I would prefer you call me, but you could certainly call your agent and just ask those questions. Ask to sit down if you haven't done that. It really is. I mean, listen. We know we don't like to talk about insurance as much as we do, but we know that insurance wasn't the most exciting thing on your mind that day when you have that meeting. But that 45 minutes can really make a difference, not only in what you're paying, but in your level of understanding and what you're really getting out of your policies.
Well, Mike, I have a really fun idea for you to mix it up on talking insurance. I saw a TikTok video the other night of a teacher who always tried to have a different introduction for when he starts class every day. And the video showed him setting up in the gym. And when he came on in the classroom, he was swinging on a rope and he had like George of the Jungle music. So I'm not saying you need to go to that level, but
I need to bring them in.
you're right. Yeah, and as a side note, kind of something that is that both of us would benefit from, but I just had a memory pop in my head. Something you said triggered this where I grew up with State Farm being our homeowners insurance provider, and the insurance agent would send us all a birthday card. And I remember being so surprised from getting a birthday card from my insurance agent when I was a kid. And I was like, this guy, like, I don't really know him, but he took the time to send me a card. That was really cool. And he was consistent too. Like, so anyway, I think his name was Rick. I don't remember his last name, but anyway, shout out to everybody who sends birthday cards. And I don't know if you do that, but
We actually do phone calls. We call everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think as a business owner, that makes sense. If you're in a business where you interact with a lot of people and you have a client base, I think remembering those things is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having the systems in place to
Right.
be good about following up with that. So I've got work to do in that department. I always mean to, and I think some of that goes back to make sure that you ask those questions early on. But anyway, so I love that you do that. So let's transition to, we've been talking a little bit about established homeowners policies, and covering, I think you mentioned a really important point. I can hear parents out there going, I don't really have time much beyond what every day requires, but I think it's so critical, like you said, to take 5 minutes, go around, take pictures of each room, the important electronics or devices that you have, and just make sure that you have that stored in the cloud. So if your cell phone gets lost in a fire, that's not dependent on one device. Internet security would tell you to have your data backed up in 3 different places. So please, I mean, just if you're watching this, and I'm not saying that I'd love to hear you affirm this, but I just think it's a really important thing that if you can take 5 minutes and go record your belongings, or even important documents too, have those backed up digitally in some place that's secure, I think would be a really good way to help protect yourself. Because I mean, we don't ever plan for natural disasters to happen, but unfortunately they do. And if we can take a little bit of time now, maybe it'll save that headache later.
Absolutely. Well, I would echo exactly what you said. And again, remember that beyond the difficulty of that claim experience, beyond the fact that you just had a kitchen fire or you just had a house fire, not only is there the stress of, oh my gosh, where are my kids going to sleep tonight, and how, what do we need to do, and there are the technical things that are going to come into play too, right? The very tactical things. And remember that the insurance company is effectively going to give you this and say, okay, well, what did you have? So that backup of information just for your mind, again, that video that I talked about, opening doors and drawers, is super important, right? How much does a set of king sheets cost now? I guarantee it's more than what it cost when you bought the last set. So, really remembering, oh my gosh, I had 3 or 4 sets of king sheets, I had towels, I had, it's little things, right? It's board games, it's kitchen utensils, it's all those things that you just wouldn't ordinarily be able to remember at the drop of a hat, to fill out the form to say, what did you have? So I think it's a good question. It's that piece of free advice that we'll throw out there that is really something that can benefit everybody.
Sure. So what would you recommend for existing homeowners to do to make sure that, I mean, it sounds like to make sure that their agent is active and engaging with them, asking good questions on an annual basis about their current home or any updates that have been made to the home. Is there anything that you think when maybe an existing homeowner is looking at changing policies, or questions they should ask around that type of discussion? Is it different than, I guess, what we were talking about earlier?
Well, so no, I think you make an interesting point. I'm gonna kind of take it down a different path. And I think that if you're considering changing policies, there's probably a couple of things there. You're probably frustrated that maybe there's been a change in the premium of your policy, or you could be frustrated at a lack of service. There's probably something going on. There's probably a root cause of what has you frustrated and looking to shop. So, you know, whether you decide to give your current agent another opportunity or not, make sure that you sit down with the person the prospective new agent. Make sure that you give that time so that a thorough review of your program can be made. Because um, if you don't do that, unfortunately, I think what do they say? If you only do what you've always done, you'll never get better than you've always had. So if you repeat the same patterns of behavior, you're probably not going to get a different result. But allowing, at least at that initial um, interview, like we talked about earlier, that professional to kind of ask those questions that are important that you may not have been thinking about can really make a difference.
So, what do you see being the most common things that people file insurance claims for? And is that something that's typically covered or well covered in a policy?
Yeah, I think, I can only speak for us at my agency, and I would tell you from a homeowner's perspective, I think the ones that we see the most are obviously roofs and probably water backups in basements,
Hmm.
like sump pump failures.
Okay. Now, with roof, does that also include siding? Like, I mean, having lived in a particular neighborhood, no, I shouldn't be specific, but in a previous home edition, we would walk around and see it was just always inevitable. If a certain windstorm came through, you would see siding flapping on the sides of houses and, several homes with tarps on the roof. So, and I think we had to file a claim at one point, and we were grateful that what we had to file over was not nearly, to any extent of what we saw our neighbors have. But, it was certainly eye-opening to experience what that policy did and did not cover with the type of deductible. So can you speak into that? Like, because I think that honestly, if someone's going to file a claim for some type of wind or hail damage, it's probably going to be one of those two things. I mean, obviously provided basements as well.
That's
Um,
right. I may be able to add deductible structure as that fourth question that you may ask about. There are a lot of carriers that have a separate wind and hail deductible from the all peril, from the remaining peril deductible. So you may have to pay a different deductible for wind or hail versus that kitchen fire that I talked about. So what I will tell you is that when it comes to those, couple pieces of advice, and that would be um, select a contractor that you called. We want you to find them. We don't want them to find you necessarily. Okay. Just a piece of advice from patterns that have been established in our area. I think number one, call your agent. Let them know that you've had damage. Ask for advice. That's what we're here for. We are here to be your advocate, and we really want to provide you with the information you need to make an informed choice. Um, and we can really try to make that process as easy as possible. So again, my recommendation would be to work with somebody that you found to try to get that done. If that's where we are in that process, if you got shingles blown off and siding flapping from your house, give us a call. We can kind of set the process up for you. And then as you start to look at restorative action, you want to make sure that you're working with somebody that you found in most cases.
yeah. So what would be an example, like when you say somebody that you found, that sounds contrary to getting like a flyer delivered to your neighborhood? Is that type of what you mean by an an
Well,
example, or is it
yeah.
different than?
So I would just tell you, this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying this on behalf of any carrier, or I'm just giving you kind of personal advice here. But what we have seen is when you have those kind of widespread storms, especially in larger subdivisions, within minutes, there's a descending of the different vehicles coming in, all offering free inspections, and some going as far as to make claims that they would waive deductibles and things, which obviously puts us in a whole different situation with the insurance commissioner. We don't want to be in any bad situations there, but usually getting the same type of referral that you would, if you're going to ask somebody, you don't see dentists coming in and giving free inspections and looking for clients and just out of the blue. So you probably want to get a referral for your dentist from somebody that you know and trust. And so I think that referral network is really important. Also, just talking to your agent, asking about questions, and they will be able to direct you in terms of next steps. What you would want to think about before you filed. What steps should you be taking now? Those kinds of things.
That makes sense, because I think, for example, we had a grill blow over a few months after we moved into our new home, and the grill was a nice standalone grill, and it cost about $1,000 or whatever to replace that, and we could try to file a claim over it, but it's one of those things that, is it worth filing a claim and possibly having our deductible or insurance go up because of that, versus just avoiding doing that and just paying it out of pocket? So on little things like that, do you have any advice or suggestions?
I think again, call your agent and ask the person in that office that you're really comfortable with. Ask to speak with the agent if you actually sat down with the agency owner. And I mean, you are more than welcome to call us anytime. And we would try to give you the best advice that we can to try for you to make an informed decision and make sure that you get squared away.
Yeah. So what's the typical timeline? Let's say that, we're coming into winter, which most people don't think about this, but ice and snow can actually dam up in the sense of creating a backlog of snow and ice on your roof. And that can create some issues. So with that, do you have any other things that people need to be looking out for when it comes to the winter season and homeownership that you see maybe an increase in claims around, or is that maybe the only one?
Well, I think a lot of situations can be assisted. We can help by doing some maintenance, making sure that there's not leaves in your gutters, that water has an opportunity to go away when it does thaw. There are, obviously, if your gutters are full of water and snow and ice, and you've got freezing going on, look in your home for signs of that. Water spots in your ceiling, those kinds of things. A lot of times that's a precursor to more damage. But again, I think your best bet is to, if you see something and you have a concern about it, surface that to the office that you're with and ask for some guidance on where you need to go from there. Sometimes there's things that are maintenance related that are going to be repairs, unfortunately, that have to be made, and sometimes it's something that we'll want to jump in and right away know that we gotta help out.
Yeah. So I think one thing that you've said directly and maybe indirectly throughout this whole interview is, if you have a question or a concern, to feel like you are at liberty to reach out to your agent. And having worked with a number of clients before, I think maybe some of the fear or concern around maybe taking you up on that is, oh, if I call, then they might increase my rate because they know that I have a problem, even if it doesn't go anywhere. Is that a true fear?
Well, so I think most of those concerns are generated from folks who have called the carrier directly. And remember that when you call the carrier with a loss, that is likely to be processed as a claim. So that's where some of that is some of those concerns has been generated. Again, if you call me with a general question asking for guidance on, hey, if I were to have some damage and this is, what it would look like, what steps could I take? I think we are more than equipped to help you with the kind of the process. First of all, how the claims process works, but leading up to that, things you would want to know, things you want to arm yourself with information on.
So this is basically a really good life example of where asking for a friend could come into play.
Right. What was that? Who wants to be a millionaire? Phone a friend?
Yeah. Okay, well, Mike, we are coming up on the hour. What would you say are the top 3 things if you had to sit someone down and just really make sure that they hammer home, please know this about insurance, or when you are looking at homeowners insurance, what are 3 pieces of advice?
3 pieces of advice. Well, I think build the relationship and commit to meeting regularly. I think that is absolutely critical. And again, that's to put you in the best situation. I think number 2, have a firm understanding of, how you're specific, or is it specific to homeowners insurance, Jessica, that you're looking for? I think understand the coverages, understand what your home is covered for, what your personal property is covered for, what, are there limits on, specific things, jewelry or firearms or collections of some kind. Do you have business property in the home? You want to make sure that you understand and are open about the things that, are specific to your homeowner situation. And then the third thing would be, be open to reviewing those policies and understand that not all of them are the same. They are not all apples to apples. There really are differences from policy to policy, and it really is important that you understand how yours is going to take care of you.
Yeah. I was going to try and leave one last, or that be our last question, but I had one other thought that I think is really relevant to our discussion. And that is, do you see any difference in policy or quality of service with a company like the size of State Farm versus maybe somebody that's more of a local mom and pop insurance company? Or do you have any pros and cons if a client were to evaluate 2 different companies like that? Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, I think that they're essentially, there's probably a lot of differences. I will tell you that I think it boils down to 6 of one and a half dozen of the other, and I would be happy to have this conversation offline with anyone who is interested, giving you specific examples. But I think the size matters in terms of community response. And if you think about a big storm being scalable, the larger the company, the more quickly they are able to respond and take care of the largest number of people. So whether that's a natural disaster, whether that is a localized terrible hailstorm like we had in April of 17, if you're talking about a tornado, the size of the company matters in terms of a response and ability to settle claims. It really does. I think service comes down to the individual office that you're dealing with, and so what we like to say is that we have the power of big and the service of small in our office. I mean, my agency that I own is we've got the same 4 people there every single day, taking care of you, focusing on obviously different roles and responsibilities, but ultimately we get the opportunity to be backed by the largest insurer in the country of autos since World War II and of homes since the early 1960s. And ultimately, if I were to leave you with one thought, if you kind of just go through what I've talked about on this, I think that the way for me to sum it up best is the folks that we know the best are the ones that we're able to help the most. And whether that's me or any agent, I think that they would agree with that.
Well, that's wonderful, Mike. And thank you again for taking time out of your evening to share your advice and wisdom on the subject. What would be the best way for people who have watched this interview to connect with you if they'd like to know more about your company and service?
Oh, that's very kind of you. Yeah, so we've got a website, justcallmike.net. You can email me at mike@justcallmike.net, or you can give us a call, 317-769-5300.
Okay. And what services do you guys cover?
So we are insurance and financial services. So we do all of the property and casualty that we've been talking about tonight. Homeowners policies, auto, we do life, we do business, we do health, we do disability. We also are a registered rep, so we can help with some planning for the future. And then I'm actually also a licensed mortgage loan originator and can help you with home loans as well.
Wow. So you guys do it all. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Please connect with Mike if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you all next Thursday. Thank you so much, Mike. Have a great evening.
You too.
Bye.